Human ecological adaptations is one of those topics that is most not very well understood among the general people, even among the students as well. It is one of those topics that goes on to form a central theme for understanding why is it and how is it that the human beings go on to look very, very different. It is one of those topics that also goes on to help anyone to know some very obvious questions. Why is it that the Negroes are black? Why is it that they go on to have a woolly hair? Why is it that the people go on to have a different type of physique in different type of regions? Why is it that in some places the hair is short? Why is it that it is going to be long? Why is it that the people going to be having a blonde hair? Why is it so that the Masais are so tall? And of course, why is it that some of the people in some regions, like in Ladakh and other places, go on to follow a social system that we're going to be calling it by the name of polygamy? The concept of human ecological adaptation is the ability of the human being to adapt themselves ecologically in different type of climatic conditions, in different type of ecological conditions, and what have been these ecological conditions and how is it that these ecological conditions have evolved. There are four levels, there are four segments of this topic that we are required to know. The first is the concept of human ecological adaptation. The second is the levels at which this adaptation takes place. The third is the types both, that is morphological adaptation, and of course the cultural adaptation, that is going to be the third, and the fourth of course is the concluding part of it. So these are the four components that we require to know with respect to the topic, and that will go on to help a student to answer any question that can possibly be asked from it. There are four levels at which the adaptation takes place. One of them is the genetic level. Genetically, come what may, a person living in Siberia will not go on to be like a person who is going to be living in the Kalahari. This is largely because this is how this entire of the genetic trait has gone on to evolve for so long a period of time. It is in this process of genetic evolution that first what would have happened was, as the human beings went on to evolve in Africa, and thereafter they started changing their geographical location, ecological location, they may have moved on to a place in Siberia. In Siberia, as they went on to encounter a different type of a climatic condition altogether, they had no option other than to adapt to that condition. And in adaptation, they went on to follow certain type of traits in their physiography that was not available some time back. So they started changing themselves. In a similar manner, as they went on to live in the mountainous regions, they also started changing themselves in order to adapt themselves to that type of a condition. And since then, this genetic trait has gone on to pass from one generation to another generation. That is, the phylogenetic tree that is going to be evolving, that of course goes on to show certain different components. But all in all, the basic traits have remained the same. The second is at the physiological level. Now, at the physiological level, there are going to be some short-term changes and going to be some long-term changes. The short-term changes at physiological level can go on to be, in response to a warm condition, the human beings can go on to profuse. They can go on to profusely sweating. And as they go on to sweat profusely, the body goes on to become cool. That is at a short-term level. A long-term level is in terms of physiography, is the type of changes that the human beings go on to evolve in their morphology to a certain extent. Some of these things go on to be associated with, take an example of a short hair or a loss of a body hair that is going to be found associated with the skull of the Maasai girls. That is at a long-term level. The third is going to be at a growth and development level. That is, people as they start growing in some of the places, like in the mountainous regions, they go on to develop a larger lung capacity. In a similar manner, all those people who are adapted to living in the mountainous regions, they have a very well developed musculature. So they have a very well developed leg muscles of sorts, thigh muscles in this case. In comparison, the leg muscles and the thigh muscles in the plain regions of the people living in the plain region is not so well developed. So one can go on to make a complete difference between both of them. That is in Nepal, the people will go on to have their leg muscles very well developed, while in some places like that of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, people will go on to have a different physiological trait altogether. The fourth is at the cultural level. That is, the type of cloth that one can go on to wear, the type of a building one can go on to make, the type of living conditions one can go on to have for themselves, that is going to be at a cultural level. So these are the different levels. There are two levels that are going to be talked about in general as part of human ecological adaptation. The first is the morphological level. One of the components of morphological level is the skin color. People go on to develop a dark skin or a light skin depending on the amount of sunshine that the region has. That means depending on the exposure to the sunlight. That's going to be one trait. The second trait in this case is going to be the greater the amount and intensity of the sun rays in the sunlight, the greater in general is going to be the amount of the melanin content. Higher the amount of melanin content, darker is going to be the skin coloration. This is the basic reason why people go on to be living in equatorial regions specifically go on to be having a darker skin coloration. This is the basic reason also that why people who go on to be living in tropical conditions also go on to be having a somewhat darker skin coloration. But as one goes on to go from equator to the poles, the skin coloration goes on to become lighter and lighter. Accordingly, the so-called division of the racial groups that has been made, that sometimes goes on to be having a racial connotation and somewhat an ignominious connotation as well, has nothing to do with it, has nothing to do with the culture, life and anything. It has everything to do with how well they go on to be adapting themselves ecologically to the intense sunshine. People who don't go on to know that type of adaptation, they have enormous advantage living in those places. You pick up a person who is having a lighter skin color, put it in equatorial regions, for them a good amount of heat will go on to become unbearable. They won't be able to adapt themselves so easily in those conditions. Of course, they can go on to adapt themselves culturally by putting an AC and a host of other things. Maybe that their mind will go on to control their body, but then skin color is all in all adaptation to the ecological conditions. The second is a color of hair and eyes. Picking up the color of hair. A darker hair coloration is again indication of the fact that the amount of melanin in the hair is going to be high, and that the amount of melanin, high amount of melanin content is in response to intense sun rays. That is one part of it. So people who go on to be living in the equatorial regions or in tropical regions, they do go on to be having a very dark haired coloration. That's one part of it. In a similar manner, the eyes are also going to be darker in coloration. People who go on to be living in the equatorial zones, in tropical zones, they go on to be having a black eye coloration. While all of those people who go on to be living in far off northern regions, their eye coloration goes on to become lighter and lighter and lighter. So, people going to be beyond 40 degree north, 45 degree north latitude, they start having an eye coloration that goes on to be like a green color, that can go on to be hazel color, that can be blue color, that can be brownish as well. and so on. This is largely because once again the sunlight outside is not going to be so intense as the eyes will require to be darker in coloration. This is with respect to the color of the eyes. But then there are going to be several other forms which go on to be associated with the form of hair. For example, one of them is going to be the nature of hair. That is going to be the third one, nature of hair. The nature of hair among some people go on to be very, very different. It is different because taking an example of some places, some regions like that of the equatorial regions, picking up the case of Masai, where the temperatures are very high, the Masai go on to be having a skull that is by and large clean, and some of you have observed that the girls will go on to have a good amount of a clean scalp in between some thickets of hair here and there. So hair on the skull of these girls going to grow like bushes, where you're going to go here and there of sorts. And these girls, they will go on to have something like some 60, 70, 100 ponytails of sorts. Such type of a hair form is what we're going to be calling it as a filfil or a peppercorn. And that is in adaptation to a very, very hot climatic condition, because the skull requires to be clean essentially for the purpose of radiating that heat. That is one form of hair. In a similar manner, there can be another form of a hair that can go on to be associated with the type of a hair color that Indians go on to be having it. So they're going to be having a reasonable amount of it, essentially for the purpose of being acting as a cushion to protect their skull. But then Masai, the Bushmen, they go on to be showing a completely different type of a hair form in this case. With respect to eyes, once again, that is the form of the eyes can go on to be different. For example, some people will go on to have an eye that is going to be big, bulbous eye. That can go on to be, of course, an Indian can go on to be having it, a West Indian can go on to be having it. Some people will go on to have an eye that is going to be very, very different. There is beneath these eyes, there is going to be a good amount of fat pad deposits. An eye is going to look like as if a black string that is going to be in the eyes, and that is going to be somewhat triangular in nature. Now, such type of an eye form is largely because of a thick film of skin that is going to be there. There is a fat pad that is going to be just beneath this eye, that is going to be called by the name of epicanthic fold. This is an epicanthic fold that is prevalent among the people who are going to be living in Siberia, in the high regions of Tibetan region. They go on to be in the northern portion of Siberia as well. They can go on to be the Lapse, Kalmukse, Yakutske, Samoyedse. All of those people will go on to have such type of a fat pads, which is going to be called by the name of a epicanthic fold. It is these epicanthic folds that goes on to allow the people to have a partly closed eye. It looks like that his eyes are going to be closed. So that is in response to a cold climatic condition. The fifth in this case is a response to the cold stress. If the conditions are going to be very, very cold, then the body will not go on to be tall, it will not go on to be shapely, it will not go on to be lanky, it will going to be short, it will going to be stocky, it will be going to be much more broader in comparison to being a longer body. To take two extremes, one of them is going to be that of the Masai people who go on to be having an average height of something like some 6 feet 6 inches, 6 feet 7 inches of sorts, while people who go on to be living in places like that of Siberia, they will be short, they will be stocky. Now, the overall volume of the body in response to the surface area will go on to be very, very different for a person in Siberia, for a person in the high reaches of Tibetan region, and it will be largely because the volume that is the overall surface area will be less in comparison to the volume of a body in places like that of Siberia, so that the amount of heat that is radiated is going to be less and less. That's one part. That's one response to the cold distress. There can be a second response to the cold distress as well. That is, we talked about, that is, the eyes will go on to have an epicanthic fold. There will be a third one as well that can go on to be cultural nature as well. But that can be, that is, the metabolism in this case is going to be very, very high of these people. That's going to be the fifth type of ecological adaptation. The fourth is, we just talked about, extending from it is the body stature. We talked about, that is, the Masai who go on to be living in the equatorial zones of Africa, in Kenyan highlands, in Tanzanian plains. They're going to be very, very tall. And of course, they are tall largely because their hands are thin, their thighs are thin, their entire body sculpture is very thin, so that the surface area is going to be very, very high, so that they can go to radiate a very high amount of heat very, very, very fast. Now, that will go on to help their body to be cooled. In complete contrast to a person who goes on to be in the northern portions of Siberia. That is because of the body stature. Then the seventh is going to be the fat pads which go on to be protecting the people from the cold distress. People who are adapted to living in these cold regions like Alaska, whose face is going to be completely exposed, when they're going to be moving on sledges, they will going to have a lot of fat on their face. So there will be a good amount of fat all around, and the face will be also squarish in shape. The high amount of a fat deposit on the face is an adaptation to the cold condition that going to be existing outside. So that is going to be one of them. And of course, they're going to be having a very high amount of fat deposits in their body, essentially with an aim to protect themselves from cold conditions. They are not going to be thin and they are not going to be lanky as the Masais are going to be. So, Eskimos going to fall in that category. Laps going to fall in that category. Samoyeds going to fall in that category. Even Yakuts and the Chukchis also going to be falling in that type of a category. The eighth modification is going to be that of the fat reserves that goes on to be in the Bushmen. Bushmen people go on to be living in the Kalahari region. Now these are the people who have to go without meals for a good amount of time, maybe for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days as well. Essentially, the girls have to feed their young ones also during the same time. That means that they have to feed their young ones during the same time. And because the girls go on to be feeding them at that point of a time, that means they have to feed the young ones in response to that. It basically means that they have to derive their energy from the fat reserves that they have built up. Now, these fat reserves in Bushmen go on to be existing in the form of an enormous amount of fat deposit that goes on to be in their buttocks. That is called as steatopygia. It is this steatopygia that goes on to exist in these regions. It is this steatopygia that is responsible and that is present in both men and women. Women going to be having a very pronounced steatopygia in some of these African regions, and that's the basic reason that they're going to be having a larger buttock than in comparison to other people of the world. And that is a modification of these fat reserves, because these people may have to go without meals or even less amount of meals for a good amount of time when there are dry conditions and the ecological conditions don't go to favor them. The ninth is the biological adaptation that is going to be taking place at high altitudes. Now, living at high altitude, like some places in Ladakh, means that in those places at 4,000 meters of elevation, the air is real thin. That is, you require to have a lung power essentially for the purpose of for the purpose that you can go on to adapt yourself in these conditions. Most of these people go on to be having two types of adaptation. One of them is that is the oxygen dissolution in the haemoglobin is very high. That's one. And the second is that the lung size is going to be also very large in these people, in all of those people. And this is very evident. it's for this reason one can go on to understand, it's essentially for this reason that if you go on to bring some of these people and who are very good runners on these highlands, and if you go on to bring these people on the plains, they will start running very, very fast. One of these factors that has led to the Kenyan and the Tanzanian people go on to be very good long distance runners is one of these factors is that they are very light. Second is that, of course, they keep on running throughout their whole life. Remember the movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy? The third is going to be, that is, the lung size is going to be very, very large. And also that oxygen affinity in their blood is also going to be very large. So, long distance runners, if you go to observe that, you will not going to find as good a long distance runner as an African who going to be living in the Ethiopian highlands or in Kenyan highlands in those places. This is a biological adaptation of living at high altitudes. So human beings do go on to show a good amount of morphological adaptation. However, the morphological adaptation seems to be a bit less in human beings in comparison to the cultural adaptation. It is cultural adaptation that is much more pervasive in the human beings. This is largely because human beings have a high mobility these days, and they have always been having it. For example, a person may go on to take a flight all the way from Varkoyansk and may go on to land in some place in Tripoli, or may go on to be in Fort Lamy in Chad. Now, immediately their temperature goes on to change from something like minus 30 to 40 degrees centigrade to some place where the temperatures are going to be 30 to 40 degrees centigrade. So, a difference of plus 60-70 degrees centigrade of a temperature cannot be handled by the body unless there is some degree of a cultural adaptation. So, they will go on to have a dress to match it, they will go on to have a house to match it, they will go on to have a car to match it. Now, all of those type of changes that the human beings have done around themselves is what is going to be called as the cultural adaptation. So, that is going to be one of them. Second is that human beings are always going to be having an intermixing nature. For example, it's a possibility that a person who goes on to be having a black skin will go on to marry a lady who is going to be having a white skin. It's distinctly possible that a lady who will go on to have who will be adapted to living in some island conditions in East Asia, in Japan, she may go on to marry an Indian. The child that is going to be born out of their wedlock or even out of it, in wedlock or out of it, that will go on to have the genetic traits of both of them. And that goes on to be defying all of these type of adaptations that we have been talking about. These were some of the things that were not existing some time back because the adaptability which have been essentially associated with the mobility has been less. Human beings required some amount of a time to move into a region. They required some amount of time to live in that region. For example, some time back it did went on to happen that as the human beings went on to move from Africa and they went on to start living in Siberia, in all of those places living in Siberia, what they would have done was that living in Siberia, they would have isolated their gene pool and there would have been only 25, 30, maybe 100 people who started living in that place and they started developing such type of a trait that went on to become very, very different and their genetic isolation went on to reinforce these things as well. It is this reinforcing that went on to take place that was pretty significant in this case. Now, that is what we're going to be calling it as adaptation because of intermixing. And one of these adaptations is cultural. One form of cultural adaptation is that the Masai people go on to keep animals. They are going to be having a light coat and a dark coat, that is a colored coat. And Masai people themselves never knew that. Why is it that they go on to keep light colored animals in all of those regions which were having a high temperature and low water availability, and dark colored animals in all those regions that were having a low temperature and a high water availability. Now, this is largely to do with a light color is able to reflect a good amount of heat back into the space, while a dark color is able to absorb it. So, If the dark colored animals would have been kept in those regions where the heat conditions were high, then they would have demanded a good amount of water, and maybe that their survival would have been also at stake. And these Maasai people had no idea why is it that they go on to keep these light and dark colored animals in different type of conditions. It's now that we're going to know this is an adaptation. This is a cultural adaptation of the Maasai people. Second such type of cultural adaptation is going to be birth spacing in the Bushmen. The Bushman women have to move with their child strapped on their back, and they have to move with their partner, with their companion, with their husband, of course. Now these people, as they go on to keep moving from one place to another place, in the process of their movement, they have to run fast because the husband is going to be having a spear, he is going to be having a bow and arrow. It is with the help of his spear and bow and arrow that they will go on to hunt. The girls keep on gathering certain things which have fallen from trees from here and there and so on. Now, if they're going to be having a child whom the Bushman girl has to take care of, then she won't be able to gather and she won't be able to keep pace with the boy as well. Now, they must going to have a proper spacing in the birth of these two children, and unless it goes on to 4 to 5 years, it is not possible that the child will start taking care of itself. So at 4 or 5 years of age, the child starts moving with the boy, and he will start showing different type of animals, and that the father will go to shoot that animal down, while the husband will going to have one young one strapped on her back, and she can keep on moving. She cannot going to keep two children strapped on their back at all. And how they're going to do it, that is still a mystery, but then this is a type of a birth spacing that the Bushman women go on to give. The third is the change in the lifestyle of the people in some regions, and that has been observed in some of these people. For example, take the case of Eskimos. What the Eskimos going to do is that they're going to live in an area where the temperatures are going to be very, very, very low, minus 30, 40 degrees centigrade. So, the igloo that the Eskimos going to build, inside that igloo they're going to burn seal oil, they're going to eat seal oil, they're going to eat seal milk, they're also going to be having a coating of a seal skin all along their igloo. Now, their entire life goes on to revolve around those seals. Essentially, they're going to drink a very large amount of an oil to keep themselves warm. That is a cultural adaptation that the Eskimos go on to follow. And it may go on to sound something unusual for us, but the type of temperature conditions under which we are likely to put some woolens on us, that may be about 5 degrees and 10 degrees centigrade of temperature condition that will be too cold for us. Under these conditions, the Eskimos going to make merry. They're going to shed all of their clothes and they're going to be treating it like that of a summer inside an igloo. So, they're going to be having various types of cultural adaptations. The way that they're going to hunt for fishes, that is the type of fishes that they're going to take, and the high amount of a non-vegetarian diet that goes on to form their lifestyle and their food habit as well. The fourth cultural adaptation can go on to be a landslide adaptation that goes on to be taking place in Nepal. So it is going to be in Nepal that people going to be waiting for landslides to occur. Now, what people are going to do is they know that is when the first rain is going to be coming, there will be inevitably a landslide, and they can go on to move themselves towards a safe location. And they're going to see when the landslide is going to come. As soon as these landslides going to come, then a good amount of a fresh soil is going to be exposed on the surface. It is over this fresh soil that the Nepalese start cultivating crops. They're going to keep waiting for that. So landslide in some regions of Nepal is not going to be something that can be treated with some degree of a terror, and they're not perceived as a hazard at all. Some of you can go on to understand that in a similar manner, all of those islands that are going to evolve in the Ganges plains, near to about Bhagalpur, which are called as Diara, is also an adaptation. Floods are a natural phenomena or natural occurrence that goes on to take place in the Diara regions. And because they're going to be taking place in these regions, Consequently, people keep on waiting for the floods, and once the floods have receded, they leave some islands, and it is these islands that the people go on to use for the purpose of cultivation of different type of crops. That's also an adaptation one can think of. And in a similar manner, there is an adaptation in the Mississippi plains as well, where the people going to climb the trees as and when a flood has to come. They wait for about 6-7 days of a time for floods to spread out their nutrients, and then when the flood water has receded, they're going to come back. They don't require that much amount of fertilizer essentially for the purpose of growing these things at all. The fifth is polyandry. That is, it's going to be one form of polygamy in Ladakh. In Ladakh, the girls happen to marry 2 or 3 boys. Now, why is it that they're going to marry? Of course, one of the reasons of these girls getting married to these 2 or 3 boys is because they don't want to put that much amount of pressure on the land. Now, what it means is that in such type of regions like Ladakh, where any amount of increase in the population will go on to have an insurmountable trouble created for the people, because the land is not in a position to support that much amount of number of people. Now, the land's inability to support that much number of people has prompted the people to check their population. And how is it that they're going to check their population? They check their population essentially because in the process of checking their population, what they're going to do is they're going to marry 2 or 3 boys so that the number of children that a girl can go on to bear, that goes on to become less. Maybe she is able to give birth to about 2 or 3 young ones. So that way, the population will go on to remain stable for a long period of time. Now that is what we are going to be calling it the process of polyandry. And polyandry is with an ostensible aim of allowing the population to be kept in check. That's one form of it. This is an ecological form. There can be some social reasons as well that goes on to happen in Kerala, and as well as in as well in some of these places in Nagaland as well. Now, in contrast, if you can go on to take a look at it, that is, there used to be one male marrying maybe 4 or 5 of these girls, wherever the resources were very, very profound. The resources were unlimited of sorts. Now, this was what was the situation that was in the fertile West Bengal plains. So, a male used to marry something like some 2 or 3 girls in that place. And the social system had evolved in these regions in such a way that it was not considered to be any type of a taboo at all. And that there used to be a concept of a bagan badi in those places, and that the children used to call their eldest mother as a badi ma or choti ma, depending on that, badi ma, mazli ma and choti ma. Therefore, such a large family was required in all of those places, essentially for the purpose of having a complete control over the resources that were available to the people. And with just 1 or 2 people, it was not possible that these resources would have been managed, particularly these type of agricultural resources. So human beings do go on to show a variety of type of cultural adaptations. And it is these cultural adaptations that are much more profound in the human beings than in any animal, because human beings can go to move, they have a larger brain size, they can go to perceive certain things, and also that human beings can go on to use technology much more efficiently. Morphological adaptations can go on to have certain type of connotations which of course more wise people, more learned people always going to understand that. The one question that can go on to be asked from this section in the mains examination can be discuss the different type of ecological adaptations people go on to show. Maybe this question can go on to put it in another form, that the human beings go on to have a greater amount of cultural adaptation in comparison to that of a morphological adaptation. Explain with examples. These are the 2 representative questions that can be asked from this topic. From a prelims point of view, in general studies, the question can go on to be associated with the stereotypia that is going to be found with the Bushmen people, the type of hunting that the people go on to do in the Kalahari Desert, say, that the people are going to be very, very tall, they are going to be lanky, they are going to be having a very large surface area. And why exactly is the reason? Why is it people going to be having a broad flat nose in some places like that of equatorial regions? Now, a flat nose is essentially an adaptation to when the people going to exhale, they're going to release a lot of hot air. And a narrow nose is when the people going to inhale, they're going to compress it, and when they're going to exhale, they're going to release a limited amount of it. It is essentially an adaptation to it. So these are the type of questions that a candidate has to keep himself or herself in mind for the purpose of answering it. That is all on human ecological adaptation.